Hi everyone, welcome back into the studio. Well, we're going to do another Western today. This one hit me just the other day, and so I sit down like I normally do, and you can see the photo I built from it. I took like 7 different photos, different things. And, you know, one of the things for myself, riding horses for 20 years up in the Northwest, rain was all the time. We always rode in the rain. We had these gigantic slickers that I would wear that went down and went over all of my legs and covered part of the horse as well. And so I'm going to call this one Slicker Time. So he's going to be riding out into an incoming storm. And I'm going to put that beautiful rock that's right up there. Now, some of those photos I use are from very old paintings that were done in the 19th century. And then, of course, a more modern horse and rider and stuff. And I just take it into Photoshop and kind of combine the photos. It gives me something to imagine it. Then I'll take it in here, and I've done the drawing off of it. Those of you that are in the membership, I'll put the drawing in for you. And then I'll change it as we get to going. I use the photos stuff just for inspiration only, and I like to draw from that. So as far as the colors we're going to use today, same normal palette. I do have out medium beige, which I like to do whenever I'm going to do some of these warmer grounds that you see there. I'm going to have a lot of light and shadow in this painting, and that's what I want this painting to say. The rain in the distance, light and shadow, okay? The board I'm going to be painting, this one here is 15 inches by 21 inches. You could easily put it on, because there's so much extra room, you could easily put it on a 16 by 20 or something like that canvas board if you want. And that's and I gave it a one coat of the canvas prep medium and sanded it lightly with 180 grit sandpaper, and then I did my sketch up on here. So like I said, I'll put that in the community page for everyone, and those of you that are as part of the Facebook group, the Academies of Art, I'll put it in there as well. All right. So I do also have out the extra mediums here, the open medium, which I like. That's this one. That's right here. It's a little thicker, slow and dry medium, and then the real thin extender medium that I like to do, especially when I start the painting. Okay. So I'm going to pretend that the storm is not here for right now, and I'm going to look up to that back corner, and it's almost a 9. It's almost a white, and I want that so that the horseman really drives a lot of contrast to bring the horseman forward. So I'm going to make a really light gray, and I love the gray that comes from, and I need just a touch of this, blue and burnt sienna here, and then I'll take some of my white. As a matter of fact, I just might squeeze out here, find one that has a little bit more paint, squeeze out some more white out here. So these are the Heritage MultiMedia acrylics that I use, that I developed. So it was 17 years ago now I've developed these particular acrylics, and I want to get this light. This probably won't be, it'll be real close to being light. So this is about a value 9 here, okay? Real light gray. It'll dry at least one value darker, so you can see it's just a little bit darker than the white that I have over there. I'm going to take my big brush, which I left a little bit of paint in. That's kind of stiff, and those of you that watch the channel quite a bit, I always end up leaving some kind of paint in my brush all the time. I don't worry about it because hand sanitizer, so it just takes it right out. You can see it's already cleaning it right out. So I did this for the last floral I did on the other channel, and I left a little bit in it the other day, so this cleans it right out right away immediately. And this is just your normal hand sanitizer that you can get. It's good to find one with at least 60%, 60 to 70%, most hand sanitizers, isopropyl alcohol. And isopropyl alcohol breaks the binder in the paint and cleans your brush out right away. So even if you forget paint in it and stuff, or you want to make your brush new again, you can just use that. Now I'll just take some extender, put that in. Let's thin out this sky color here with some extender, and then we'll come right over there. That's a nice color. We'll come right over this, right over some of the rocks, right over the horseman here. And this will stay wet for a while because I mixed the extender in. I'm not going to paint and I'm going to drop it right down. I drop it over the back of the hills, always over the back of the hills, because I like to paint into that wet color if I'm adding dimension to it. You don't have to. It's, I mean, because there's all kinds of ways. I've showed you all different kinds of ways to add depth and dimension to a painting. That's just one of them. But so I have this real soft gray. Let's try to remember to clean that color out of the brush this time, Dave. Okay, so I'm going to leave that mostly right in through here. And then what I'll do is I'm going to make a stormy kind of gray. I'll put some color in right now. Stormy kind of gray, I'm thinking some of the medium beige here, a little bit of the burnt sienna, medium beige. Because now the medium beige, because I'm going to have so much medium beige into the painting. And I want this slightly violet, so just a touch of the violet here, which is going to be a real cool. And I'm going to make this gray several times during the painting, so I want it to vary. Okay, so this is our first look. So I'm just going to take some of this and going to come right up over here and just start. I just wanted an idea of the color of the storm over here and just walk this across. As I get about 3/4 of the way across, I'm going to let it fade out here. So a little bit more blue this time here. Build it up right up over this corner, right down towards that little mountain there. Let it, and I use, if you notice, I use just a lot of X motions. I want this stormy sky. I can use larger strokes like this, very, very lightly touching the surface. But I don't want to smooth it out too much. So and I'm going to get this, I'll put this in for right now, right about like that. I'm going to do a lot more, guys, on this. And I want this away from his face there, just a bit more here. Boy, I tell you, that was real good, wasn't it? I want this away from his face, and then I go right through him. Let's do that again. Back that out, and let's just go right over here to our initial gray and push some of that back in. That will work. And if you want to take, let me just show you. If you really want to take something out, just take a clean brush with water and it will remove it. Okay, so, but I want some of this just happening there into the sky here. But I do want this. I added just a bit too much over here, so maybe even a little blue into this time, maybe a little medium beige, slightly different little gray over here. Let's reset this gray. See, you can just reset this softly. See, that's kind of pretty with that. It gives it a little bit more, and I know it's hard for you to see on the camera, but it gives it a little bit more atmospheric. That's what I try to go for, the atmospheric. That's better. So I want this darker little corner here, this to get lighter here. As that goes up, let's get that color out of the brush for a minute. Take the edge of your paper towel. You can back it off your drawing a bit if you want to see how he's going to come forward. That will work just like that. So that's a good line. Now, so I dropped this gray down. You can see it comes all the way down to here. Let's take like a 3/4 inch brush and we're going to paint in some soft mountains. Now, we know from all the other paintings that soft mountains get a little bit more violet and stuff as they go back. Basically, they become more like the skyline. So I'm just going to add a touch of the violet right over here. Make these just a bit more violet, maybe a little beige and a little white here. Just a real soft, see, I'll push this up just a bit here. Real soft kind of gray, maybe even lighter than that. Head towards that sky, and let's come. Now, I'm going to bring light in from the right here, so that's going to be very important. And I want this color here as I work this. I want this color to just come off in different amounts here. In other words, I tap it, I push, so I get some undulations of color. That's going to push it into the distance with a little bit of interest. Okay, so let's add a bit more light into that so that it just varies that a bit here. That looks pretty good. A little bit of it over here on the other side of this rock. So those are going to be distant mountains there. Now, let's take some of the light color here, sky color with this, and let's push some of the further areas a little bit further back, and maybe a touch of light onto the right side, which is our highlight side, the side that the light is coming from. So a bit more light here. Here we go. Just like that. And then some shadows, right? Light and shadow. That's what, and I want these just to be really soft back there. Let's go a little bit of medium beige and some of the blues and the violets here. So it's a little bit different color. And we'll add some of that up as it's coming up into the foreground here. Just little touches of it. This only thing we're doing is adding color variation. If that makes sense, okay? Color variation. Let's tap into a little bit of light on that to give the idea of a little light and dark into those hills. But they can be overall just really quite soft here. Right like that, and a few little light and shadow marks, but very, very soft. Now, this line here, where the storm is going to come, is a little bit farther forward, so I'll add a little more violet here and blue, slightly darker, maybe a bit of this beige and stuff into that here, and these will be a little bit darker. Don't do big long. I started to do a big long one there. And I don't like to do that. I like to tap and work my brush because that gives the impressions of little hills and valleys and stuff like that. And this is going to go almost, the top of this is just basically going to disappear back here. So that'll work right back there like that. Maybe a bit of the light into it, but not too much because we are going to cover most of that up with some of the rain and stuff coming down here. And if I need to add any kind of moisture, I add the extender back here to keep everything soft. So I want that dark pulled down a little further here, right? And I will add a little more blue, a little more violet, slightly different color, some extender here, a little more blue, a little more violet coming forward. Here again, just like this, tap it around a bit. Most of this will get covered up by the clouds and the rain and stuff, but we'll put some of it in there. There like that. So you got a perfect divide line, like this is a ridge line. So this side here would get, on this side of the ridge would get a bit of the shadow. And if you were going to establish a little light, it would go on this side. So even though I'll cover that up, might as well add a bit of it because I do like that into the hills. Very back hills there, very soft, but subtle changes in it. A little bit of your medium beige and stuff like that. And then in the reference, I have it going a little bit more beige and green and kind of yellow as we're going to head up to some warmer areas up into the front. Maybe just a touch. You can cool that with just a touch of your violet over here. Keep that. The violet is a color of distance into the landscapes because that's what happens to the sky. Little extender here. And lighten it up like it's going to the sky. So that's going to soften this. See how I put this into that? How it softened the color. So I start to look for that particular color back here, maybe a bit lighter here. So let's go a little bit lighter, some extender. Work through this dirty brush. Don't paint into your horse too much there, Dave. Work that right in through there. Distance there. Some distance right back here. Right back in there. Don't need it on that side. Now I'm going to pull this forward a bit here and then paint some brighter colors into it. Establish the depth. So this is going to establish basically my atmospheric depth here to my painting here. Okay, so now what I'll do is I wanted to get a little more yellows and beiges and stuff in there, maybe a bit lighter. So we'll just come back in and add some of that warmth. Just pull right across a bit. Don't do too long a ones, because little brush marks, little movements add interest, right? That's what we're looking for, that interest there. So that's pretty good. And then as we, go over to this side, we're going to start darkening it down. But maybe a bit more color into some of this back here. You could go up into that hill a bit. Imagine these hills. They're kind of coming together. So you're kind of bringing them together. In the photo, you can see in the photo, there's kind of a line of this kind of hill with that dark that pulls across that helps make a bit of a difference. And I think I'll add that. A little burnt sienna, a little bit of blue, just slightly different color. Carry it up here in the hills a bit and just let that just pull through. Here, maybe a bit of that over here. Soft. Remember, everything is, so you're getting a little darker as you come forward and keep that softness there going back. And if you need to revisit some of that softness back here on these hills to set them further back here. And you're painting the distance. You're thinking about distance there. That's what we're looking for. Let's bring this one not quite so severe, a little angle right there. That might be better. And might be good to have just a touch of this color right in there. So it doesn't cut him right across. Imagine where it's coming right in here. Put a bit of that right in there. There we go. So we got some, that's kind of what I'm looking for. A little bit of this color right in there. And so I love those variations, but it's all heading to the gray back there. That's what I'm looking for, right? And then as we come forward here, we'll take a little more burnt sienna, a little bit of blue, maybe some medium beige here, a little bit of blue here, some of this violet color. We'll get a little bit darker right up here. This will go right up against the edge here. And we'll bring this rock right here up in front of it. And we'll put that little stream right in there. Maybe a bit more blue, maybe a touch of green and burnt sienna. Green and burnt sienna is also really pretty. But I need that blue, a little bit of violet. See, I like to do this and kind of model it all together here. So it's not all perfect one color. And of course, we're going to do this a few times. Model this through here. Just kind of let those colors play right in there like that. That's going to create the first bit. Now, our job is to soften this into this, right? So we'll just slide right over here, maybe some of this gray, and we'll put in an intermediate tone across here. So, and this is what establishes distance. So, and the size, this is very important. The size of your brush marks now are very important. Bigger ones can be up here, smaller as they go back, because so see, if I come in here nice and big like this, and then I turn my brush to the side to the chisel, I create more what we call linear planes, and those linear planes shove it further back. Does that make sense? So we want to, and I want to model this just a bit, but we want to just soften. Now, I don't call it blending. I call it incorporate these colors here. And let the whole thing start to feel like it's getting lighter and lighter and lighter back there as it's going back right up against that skyline back there. And that mountain back here can get a little more color, just a bit here, that I have some of this in my brush. And if I feel like I'm getting too much, I'll thin it out a bit or add a bit of the sky color to it here. So as I set up some of the colors here in this front, and this front becomes dark, I then go revisit some of my other areas here, darkening them as I feel I can to get more depth into the painting here. Not too much of an edge there. There we go. Let's grab a little bit more, maybe a touch more violet over here. That's too violet. Let's grab that through here. We're going to have more dark up over here as we build those rain clouds in there. But a bit of this tapping and moving there. We'll bring that up and get that. So, and you can see in the photo there, it's quite a bit darker right in there, and I do like that. So, it's like, do you do it now or do you do it when you start the rain? I'm going to do a little bit more here. A little bit more blue and burnt sienna, which will help take the intensity off the blue. Some burnt sienna to take that intensity off. Let's go down. See, I like that color right there a little better than what's on the photo. That's slightly more blue here. And I like, so I do like this. And what I'm imagining is I'm going to bring this in as a light, like that's a light struck plane right in there. So a little bit of that right back there. Coming back in here. Bit of that right up there. So what I'm imagining is the light and dark of the mountains. That's all I'm doing, the light and dark of the mountains. And every one of us is going to have a little different way of doing that. You know, it's like the days when I first started painting when I was 15, and you know, I do Bill Alexander's mountains with the magic white and the paint, and you drag it down there. Everyone did something a little different because we all held the painting knife a little different. Let's put just a touch of light in some of that here. There we go. Just little bits. That's a pretty good start to it until I get the rain in there. That's a pretty good start to what it is we want to do. Let's come back up into the front. We're going to grab some medium beige. Let's go right up here. Some yellow, a little bit of green. Medium beige, yellow, a little green, a little burnt sienna, some white. We're going to have all kinds of colors in here. But I want maybe a touch more green. Some extender medium, because I don't need it like thick paint here yet. But I'm going to have this whole area lighter, warmer than this other shadow. So he's in a nice light, warm area of ground. We'll model this up, and he's going to be riding back into the coolness there. And I'll establish some more depth here in just a second. So I'm going to put a rock unit right in there. And this is just our basing in, so it doesn't have to be perfect. So we're going to put a rock right up there. Here comes our horse. We're going to go, I'm going to pull through like this because we're going to put shadow right in here. I want this painting also to be a lot about light and shadow. And I don't do that many paintings about just light and shadow, so I really want this one to be a little bit more about light and shadow. So we'll have strong sun-struck areas and strong shadows and stuff. So we'll get there. It'll be a bit, though. We'll be a bit here. And we'll push a bit of this, maybe some green, burnt sienna here, medium beige, a little white. Take some of that right in there. model this all up. Small brush marks, small movements here. This is just your base. You're blocking in. Look at it. Let's just pull some of this right to the forward there. Okay. Now, let's take a bit more of our dark, maybe a little bit of medium beige into this. And we'll darken again this line. But not big marks, not big strokes. Just small strokes here. Darken again that line. So he's going to look like he's riding over the edge right into a storm. So we want to have some of this dark streaking through here, right like that. Model it up a bit. Highs and lows of the colors, that's pretty good. And I like in that photo, I like that real light that's coming right back up there, right? Real light, right back up there. So I'm going to reinforce that. Take a little yellow in this light. Reinforce that line and that light. This got to go lighter. Boy, almost back up to like a value 8 or so. Right up there. Reinforce that light. Right there. Coming through maybe a bit more, even a bit more yellow. That makes it more sunstruck, which is what I want. That light sunstruck area there, just hitting right next to the cool storm that's going to be up there. So I might want a little bit more yellow. And you can dry this and do it a second time too. You know, so won't hurt that. Let's go just a bit more yellow here. This is come right over here and tap some yellow into it. Nice warm. I think that is going to be fine. And then I'll soften that right down here. But I want to have that real light area. Matter of fact, I'm probably going to go from my 3/4 inch, which is blending just a bit too much, I think, for me. And I'm going to pop it in more with a small, this is a small filbert. See the better line that I get right there like that with it? And I want kind of that division line. A little medium value right in there like that. So it also suggests the planes, right? The linear planes of your landscape there. Let's go a little darker. Right up here. Right up in here. A bit of that pull through. Here, I like that real light. Maybe a bit more yellow, bit of medium beige, and a bit of white here. That real light. Warmth. That's what's hitting there. A bit of that warmth coming right across in there. That one. I got a little squeaky in my chair. There we go. Maybe just a touch of light through there. Just like that to break that up. That looks pretty good. Because we're going to change it all, but that looks pretty good right now for setting that in, right? Okay, so now let's go back to our bigger brush and we'll continue. We'll take some of this light. Let's just take some of this light and let's just toss it right in here for right now. We're going to do lots of, I'm going to do short grass prairie, kind of rocks and grass and stuff up here. So I want just all kinds of model color. And I'm going to paint all kinds of interest into this. Maybe a bit more yellows here. Okay, so color, nice color. Warm area in here. And, you know, you've seen me do this with the prairie and stuff so many times, right, guys? So we know we're going to do this a lot. And then I'll bring out the brushes that I do grasses and stuff like that with. But that'll give us a, let's get a bit more. And sometimes I just, if I want to keep that interest, which is very important, I'll just go into my knife. And my knife just, the knife is such a great way to just get on a lot of color and some variation. That's all I want, some color and some this variation that's going to make this ground here just look wonderful. Okay. Okay, so yeah, let's just get some of this. And we'll push it up over the edge and we'll create grasses and stuff. Lots to do, but at least it gives us a nice feel for it. And sometimes I'll take, let's just take some of that. And you know, you drop a little bit of it like the seed. I love how that knife skips over the surface like that. See, it skips sometimes there when I push, and then I burn. This is what I call burnishing it in. But when I push, it creates that little skipping mark in there and stuff, and that gives you like, there's something else going on back there, which gives you more depth. Does that make sense? Without having to paint too much, let's just push a little bit back here. Right in there, it's just going to go in the horse, so it continues on. That's pretty good. That looks, I like the way that looks. Let's see. I didn't organize my brushes at all, so I have to kind of dig a little bit. Okay, you can use a small flat, small filbert here. Let's go in and let's take a little bit of medium beige, some blue, and some burnt sienna. We'll make the darker gray color here of his hat. Because this is what's really going to drive the contrast right here. This is what so I want this contrast right here up against that. That's what I'm looking for. A bit of the shadow right here on the brim because the light is coming on that edge there. So there'll be a little bit of shadow there. So I start with the shadows. A bit of shadow in here on the center part of his head. And then we'll grab a little beige, a tiny bit of white. We'll lighten that up a bit. And we'll do the medium value, maybe a bit lighter. Touch light. It's amazing just how you think you have the right color, but it's too dark. And we'll drop. So this is the block in though. But you can see that hat's going to look great. Let's darken that back down just a little bit. And we'll put in the vertical part of his hat here. And I'll spend some time on this hat because I like this hat. And so I'll spend some time on that. Here, there we go. And there, we'll pick that up. A little dark. There. Yeah, that's gonna, see how that contrasts right against there, right? Really, really nice. And so I probably should do the rocks, but I really wanted to see what that hat was going to look like. And yeah, and I'll probably do a couple of different colors, maybe a little warmer here. We'll do a couple of little things. Let's get his shirt in there, which is going to be a blue violet. So blue and violet, blue and quinacridone violet or red violet here. Add some white. Let's go pretty light with it right now. And this is what I like to do. So here's the violet, here's the blue, and I like to slide back and forth between them, right? So that gives you a good base. I'm just going to check the base of my light here and say, yeah, that's going to be pretty nice. I want the light of it, if you look at the light is almost the lightness that you have in the sky. So it could go a little bit lighter here. Okay, so pull some of that down. It could go a little bit lighter. But I'm going to do, I'm going to approach it like I do most of the stuff. Usually I start with shadows. But I'm going to start here with just a bit of the light. And then we will work through the shadows as well. Okay, so I'm just going to put some of this on just so I can get the right here. Now, I went over into that sky, and this is the thing about the sky. So I went over in that sky. So I'm going to clean this up. And all I have to do is just come with the sky that's close and take it out a little bit. So I'm going to want to repaint some of this in here anyway. But the sky, and then I hit the hat and took that color up in there. So just, I want to, paint that and just come close to the color. You don't have to have the perfect color each time. Let's soften this edge of his shirt out. Bit of a lost edge there. Now, while we are doing that, let's take some red violet and some blue. Let's get over to our real dark kind of colors. And if it's too intense, since you're leaning to the blue here just a bit, add some burnt sienna or a little bit of this red, and that will gray it slightly. It also warms your shadow, but it grays it slightly. Let's take a look down this side. That's going to be too dark, so let's just step over, add a bit of the light. You can use some open medium because this is nice and thick. This is my little number 4 flat, and using the flat or filbert here. And so we'll just put that side in. Let's go back up here to his other arm here. We'll push some of that in and be very casual with it. I want this painting to be real brush casual here. Pulling the shapes, right? We're just pulling the shapes. And we're going to paint in some nice folds and stuff here into his shirt. So we'll do that here. But first off, my first coming through is I'm looking for basically form shadows in like the back of his arm here. So this shadow that I drew here is a cast shadow. This is a form shadow, which is the roundness of his arm basically, see? And let's come back up over here with the light. And I like to tap and push. And so you get some different kinds of brush marks, and those different kinds of brush marks actually create the feeling of more folds of fabric and stuff. So we'll push some of this light right into the shadow there, right? Maybe a bit of this light right up here in the front. But we have that cast shadow to put on there. And a bit more, and I'll change the blue up. Maybe, when I do a violet shirt, I do like to add some blue violet, some blue-green into it, which is this phthalo blue and white. I do like to add some of that in there because it's a nice color variation, see? So we'll add some of that into the shirt. It keeps it from just being all one, like, tone here. And I like that. So we'll get his collar on there. Tiny, tiny collar here. And I went into that hat a bit, so I get to clean that all up. This is all part of what we call painting. There we go, clean that up. Okay, now I'll start to look for more specific folds, which is our violets, maybe a little burnt sienna. Colors don't have to be exactly the same every time. So something like this, there's going to be that fold. I'm just checking the glance up there as many times as you need to your photo, right? Glance up to the photo. And again, I'm not going to try to copy it because that will make my painting really stiff. So I'm going to try to just basically capture the feeling of some of it. I'm not going to try to copy it. Okay, so as we start to add the folds here, the folds and the shadows of the shirt and stuff, sometimes I feel, I use photos of real people, real shirts and clothes and stuff, and sometimes they're just too busy and I take them out a bit. But I use different corners, but I use the flat and then I come up onto the edge. I'll use that. I concentrate first on the form shadows and then start adding the little wrinkles and stuff like that you're going to have. And many times I end up reducing the amount of wrinkles because I find them sometimes distracting to the painting here. So I'll do that. Bring back up some more light, come back in and pull down some of the light side here, and I let it collide with, pick up a little bit of light in the blue here and let it collide with some of the shadows here, right? And I'll paint back and forth like this. You've seen me do this several times. I'll paint back and forth like this. Sometimes I'll take out a shadow or a fold, and then I'll come back and add it back later. But I also try to read into the fold some of the angles of that shirt. So see, I just took out too much of that shadow, but that's okay. I can put it back in, and this painting back and forth is what gives so much interest to your clothing and to what it is that you do, this painting back and forth. So you got to be willing to paint back and forth a bit. Let's just take a bit of this blue and just hit that little bit of a highlight right there that he has on that side, right? And a bit of the blue, burnt sienna, some of the violet here, and reset some of the real deep one right here, right in there, and that little smaller one. So I just reset it again, see? And it's this painting back and forth that starts to add a tremendous amount of difference. So right in here will be more of a medium tone. I'll just wipe my brush and paint into it with what I have left there. And then maybe some of the light tone, just pull across to create that wrinkle there, right in there. Grab some of this light tone here and maybe down the shirt a bit more. But depending on the size of your painting and stuff, you might have to simplify some of the stuff you see quite a bit. And that's usually what I do. Blur it back in and out. So, and paint it several times here. Change the tone up a bit. Let's put this larger plane that comes back this way, slightly darker, more of a mid-tone. Right in there. And I took out some of that shadow, so I used the point of the brush this time and put some of that shadow back in. You see, and it's that painting back and forth that and you have to do it a few times and you get the interest. Right here he has a fold that comes across right in there. I might want to just accentuate that. Maybe a bit of this one that pulls down this way here. Just like that. That looks pretty good. Let's go back up a touch lighter. Back up here towards the top of the front of his shirt, going quite a bit lighter actually. Quite a bit lighter here. And some of these little wrinkles here. Yeah, some deeper dark here for that shape. And so I might simplify to that. All of those other little folds that are coming right there, I might simplify to that and might really give the idea of a nice deep fold by putting, when you put the real severe light right up next to the severe dark, you get a real deep looking fold here. So that's up to you. You know, and so you can soften any fold with a half tone. I've shown you that in other videos. Half tones work really great. Let's take a little violet and some burnt sienna, nice deep. Let's get a little bit more shadow right back up over here, even though it's not quite that dark. Maybe down this arm here, right on that side, gives you that nice cast shadow. Let's add that cast shadow here, right in here from this arm. So this is the cast shadow. This is the arm shadow being cast onto his body from his arm. Drag that down. Let's just drop it right down here. We know it's going to go there on that. So that's going to be his shadow, right? Let's get that other shadow right back up here underneath his collar of his shirt there. Maybe bring this one back a bit more because I do like that little deeper shadow there. There, like that on that shirt. Yeah, so it's getting there. I'm getting it there. I'm need a little bit more, but it's getting there. See how you just work it and you work it, and you can adjust these shadows a bit to, you know, pull some other shapes and stuff. Maybe a little curved line there, and then I come back and work the lights again, and then work the shadows again a few times until I start to really get where I want. I want this out and then back in a bit, and then blur that line there. Leave that edge over there lost. That's what's going to cause it to recede. And I'll probably want really quite light, almost white, right up here under the front of his shirt. Right up in there. Right like that. Yeah. Even lighter yet, maybe. Right up on that point. There we go. Maybe a half tone, which I'll come right between my shadow and my light to create a softer transitional half tone, which will help soften some of these shadows on that side of the shirt. Here. There we go. Get that arm right there. Well, that's coming along. That's coming along better. And you can pull some directional ones, like little rounds here, to give some roundness to his shirt here. Like that. Here. There we go. Let's put that bit of lighter color right up here. I like that coming. There's a bit of it right there and a bit of it pulling down a bit. There. That's better. That's coming better there. But yeah. So you can see, and this is what I do. I'll refine this several times, going back and forth like that until I get the look that I want to have on his shirt there. So, and this will dry down, and then I'll probably have to paint it, you know, again. I'll show you guys that, but I'll paint it again. Let's go in, and I'm getting a little bit too serious about jumping into painting this before I get all my blocking in done. I really should get my blocking in done first and then work on it. But it's kind of nice to see that, you know, you look up there, I mean, we're capturing the feeling here of it. Shirt needs to go lighter, I think, still, but that's okay. Let's get this beautiful, the bay here, we'll get this burnt sienna and a little bit of green, one of my favorite colors to paint into the warm part of the horse right up here. And, of course, we'll do lots of stuff. And I'm going to add that yellow slicker right in here. But I want this real warm. This is going to be a really important part right in there. Let's grab a little yellow and red into this. So a bit of the red, some of the yellows right in here. And let's just work that right into here. Now, I didn't add anything to it, but you could add some, I like to tap it in there. You could add some open medium if you want to work it a bit. I'm an acrylic painter, and I don't need my colors to stay wet forever and ever. Let's go over here to the cool side. We'll add a little blue, a little violet. This will take this a little darker and cooler down over here as we put in this part of the horse. Right, and right here, because it's coming in the shadow, just like the shirt, that's coming into the shadow side of the horseman there. Okay, let's maybe a little extender. You could have open medium or a little extender. I like the extender, like you heard me say this, those of you that watch the videos here all the time, you hear me say I like the extender because it's wet, but it's slippery, and I like the slippery feeling of the extender, how it makes the paint glide on the surface even better here. So let's get some of that shadow. Let's get some of this warmth right down here. And I just take the two together. This is the block in. And then we'll use all kinds of tones for the actual painting of the horse here. And yeah, let's put some of that nice warm, almost orangey, right up here by his face, head, right up there, where it's going to be light struck. Some of that right in there. So we suggest the light strike. I want to suggest the warm against the storm. That's where he's riding into the storm. Let's go a little yellow into that, and some green into that burnt sienna, a little bit of white, maybe a touch of beige. This all softens out your horse colors here. So it's not quite as warm, different color. We'll tap that in. That's a pretty color into the horse right there. See, a little different. And let's go a bit more white here, right up onto the, right down in here. That's cool. A little bit up in here. The light struck area, right of the horse, right in there. I like that look in the photo of that right behind the saddle. That real kind of light strike area right in here. And that's a real photo of a horse and rider. That was from a royalty-free place. And so I downloaded it and put him in, then of course changed everything on him. But started out with a great idea. Let's get that burnt sienna right here, a little more burnt sienna back in here. I love that color too. So try to have multiple colors, especially on the big rump of the horse. Lots of different colors. Let's grab a little burnt sienna right into that green, maybe a tiny bit of blue into it, and just add a bit. So this is what I call the blocking in, but see, I'm blocking in with all these tones, and look how he just jets out there, looks out there on that. Isn't that neat? Let's just take some of this yellow over here, tone it with some of this burnt sienna and stuff, and that'll be his chaps. And yep. And yeah, for the longest time, I never rode with chaps until I was riding with the sheriff's department, and which I did for a number of years. I used to ride horseback patrol, and we had to go on this search and rescue through all of these thickets, and oh my gosh, I got those all over me, and so I started riding with chaps. They had a really good purpose. So I got myself a pair of chaps, and it made a big difference. And so let's actually take some of this warm burnt sienna and yellow and stuff here. Let's drop in the front part of this chest area here, a little, maybe a bit of burnt sienna and green into that, so it's not quite so yellow here. And drop in this front. Make sure we get his knee and his back leg here, because he's lifting up. He just took a stride here. Here we go. Okay. That looks pretty neat. Let's gray this. The saddle that is showing there is a little grayer, so I'll just take some of the blue in the burnt sienna. Too much blue. Let's gray into that saddle a bit. Right in here. Here we go. And we're going to keep this painting really simplistic. So I'm going to do this. I'm just going to start dragging some of the colors around like this. And they're going to override and stuff like that, but it's going to keep it really, really simplistic. I'm thinking, I don't have any white stockings on it, but I've been painting a lot of horses with white stockings on them. So maybe not have the stockings this time. But you can put stockings on if you want. Let's go with the blue, a bit of violet, and some white here. And this will be his pants. I like this because it really does a good job in going up against some of that burnt sienna and stuff of the horse. Their complements. It looks really great. So we'll give the idea of his pants there and the edge of that saddle here, back of the saddle. That'll set that up for that yellow slicker. As a matter of fact, big bright yellow slicker. Let me fix this right in here. Some of that right there. That gave him a look too big a belly here. And let's just take some yellow oxide right now and just kind of tap and drop in the idea of this slicker. Mine was really big, you know, but we're going to put it right in there and paint it a couple times. Right, just drop some of this in the folds, and I used to tie it on right there onto the back of my saddle. And so you see it's mixing up with some of that other color and stuff a little bit, and just holding your brush flat and tapping it like that, you get a lot of interest. And you know, quite a bit of the painting is there done, you know. So let's take some of that yellow, some of this white, maybe a bit of burnt sienna right over here, nice light, and just drop that right down the edge of this chaps here. And see, even though you're doing the blocking, you can do a little work at the same time, and it looks pretty nice. You know, sometimes I'll just hold my brush real flat. This is a filbert too, by the way. Hold it real flat. And, you know, you see me do a lot with the flat this whole last year, and I've had some people write me and say, can you show us the filbert? Because the filbert was my favorite brush for 20 years. I used to do everything with the filbert. Then people said, can you do some stuff with the flat? So I did some stuff with the flat, and then that became my favorite brush, and now I'm going back to the filbert again. So yeah, it's the filbert, though. If you've never used the filbert, you need to get one, because it is, to me, the most versatile of all the brushes. And one of the greatest landscape painters that I've ever studied, and I love all of his stuff, Clyde Aspavig, that's all he really paints with, is filberts. Because it's so versatile, because you can go up on the tip like this and draw with it really easy, or you can use it on the flat to get some paint down onto the surface pretty quickly. You know, so just use it there to put in a bit of contours on there. Maybe up here, let's give the idea of the ears of the horse. Some edges there, right up there like that. And I like that real dark there up against the light here, and we'll put on the front edge of his face there as well. I like that. And we'll give that little area there that will be his. But see, I can use the tip and the edge of that filbert for that, and just put that in, and it looks pretty good to begin with. Look at the depth that soft light sky, and then you get these darks on him. Look at the depth that it starts to create. Isn't that neat? That is very nice. So we'll put a bit more of this dark right in there. I can't forget to drop in. Let's just drop in the idea, a little more blue. I'm going to keep it thin, so a little bit of extender, and we'll just drop in the idea here of the tail here. Just so I don't forget it. I have been known to forget it, right? Let's just tap in a little bit of that color. And sometimes, you know, it's like Sargent said, paint with as big a brush as possible. You get all of that extra interest. And I'll take this color and almost like draw some edges, like the edge of the saddle and stuff like that here. It just gets a little more color interest. Maybe draw along, like maybe he has a belt there or something. And your job, really what I have found over the time is, I don't need to be specific. I can be very impressionistic, and the viewer will see what it is they see. Does that make sense? You know, so I don't need to be crazy specific with it. They'll see what it is they need to see there, right? And let me rinse some of that blue out of there for just a second. And I'm going to go back to my small brush here for a second. We'll go back to our violet. And let's use a little bit of burnt sienna to soften that just a touch. And we'll restate the cast shadow here. Right there up by his arm. And it goes right down here onto his chav here. Right down there. Right? Yeah, it's, I need to move his arm over just a bit, I think. So let's just get this little light right up over here. There. That's better. Fun stuff. I love doing this. So I'm doing a little more blocking in and working it at the same time, more than I've done before. So other ones you've seen me just be very careful, block in a lot of the design, and then come back and work it. Here you're seeing me do it a little bit different. And I kind of enjoy this as well. But, you know, I have a really good reference there. So I'm just going to work this yellow chap up here a bit more. And come backwards this way on it a bit more. Get some of that. It's okay if this blue gets down into that chap color there. That just, you know, it's harmony, right? It gets all that. Let's just push this right up to the top up here, joining into his belt. That's better. And a little bit of that yellow and a light coming through. Might have to let that dry. It's bleeding into a green, and which means that blue is still too wet to do that with. So, but let's take a bit of light and give the idea of his gloved hand here. Right there. So we don't forget that. It'll take a couple times of tapping it in to do that, but we don't forget that. And let's just get the, in that photo I just checked, it's more of a kind of orangey, leathery stirrup here. So let's get that in here for right now. Maybe a touch of shadow onto the inside here, right like that. And he has the grayness of his boots here, so we'll just drop in some of that color. I'll come back here several times, and you know, it's how I present the painting. It's how I like to do it is I'll put it all in there and then hit it again with a different color, hit it again with a different color, back and forth several times until I get the look and that I like. And it's just like this. So I'll put a little shadow here onto his pants, and then I'll come back and put some more light onto his pants, and you know, back and forth like that. This is the shadow, cast shadow from his hand. Push that back in there, and I'll fix that up as well. But it's starting to come along. You see that. Let's take a little, just all we need is a simple flesh, which is burnt sienna and white. Real simple flesh, because you see just a touch of him there. Just a touch of his face. Here, burnt sienna and white. Maybe just a touch darker. There we go. But if you want to add a beard and some ears and all that kind of stuff, you can do that, okay? So that gives a pretty good look so far, I think, right in there. While I had this, let's clean up some of this. Sometimes I'll clean up And before I go on to do some other stuff, let's clean up a little bit. A little burnt sienna and some blue, a little red violet, maybe a touch of green. This will get us into a nice, we'll go quite a bit heavy violet and stuff, but this will get us into an idea here for the shadow areas in here, because we're going to go light and shadow, right? And which is one of the things we wanted to do, light and shadow. So right up here like that. That cuts across, that's pretty good. A little bit of shadow here, right into here, and we'll start adding in some of the rocks here, right? So he's in a light situation, light and shadow situation. We'll add little bits of this shadow around in here, and then we got to do the cast shadow of our horse too. Most of it will cast back this way, but let's just, because I don't have the cast shadow of the horse in here. So we'll add some of that back in here, right? And let's go ahead and block in some of the rocks. Let's start up here with a real light tan going to a gray. So medium beige and a little bit of blue makes the beautiful gray colors. I want to, it's very warm in the photo, but I want a little bit of blue so that it's going to go with the sky here. And I'll come back and warm some of this up. But let's go in and put in the light plane. Yeah, that'll be fine. Before I do all of that light plane, though, I do like starting with the shadow plane, which is pure alla prima, which is what most alla prima artists do. We start with the shadows. So I'll come in here and we'll start in some of these shadows here. These rock shadows here. Like that. I'll try to keep it pretty close to the other rock, but you know me, I like to paint all kinds of things. Now, so that's a good shadow. Let's put some of that back up over here onto this one. Here, which I don't have in the reference of the photo. I just kind of drew this one in because I'm just going to paint it light and shadow like I do the rocks, like you've seen a lot. So that looks pretty good. Let's go with a half tone here, right in between the two. Maybe a bit more blue into that here. Right in between the two. Let's go with a bit of a half tone, a little bit more burnt sienna, maybe a bit of blue here, here. There we go. And I'm going to be pretty clean with the edges here on this rock because it's up close here. Okay, but we'll put in this. That medium tone's pretty nice. That looks pretty good. And again, I will paint quite a bit on these rocks and show you guys. I love to paint rocks. I'll go back up over some of this shadow, put some of that back in. Took me a while though to learn how to see rocks, see them. That was not necessary. You know, I say be casual, but not that casual. So how do you get rid of that? Well, I usually clean my brush, go back to my solvent, which is water, and pull it down into the rock. So, and that's a really good thing there too. Wipe your brush and use that solvent if you want to soften off some of the edges of the rocks, or if you feel like that might be a little too much right there. Just with the water in your brush, pull down, and that will soften some of that color exchange there a bit. Make it a little bit softer. Let's go to a small flat or a filbert, as old as possible. So this is quite an old brush. And we'll go with some light color here. And I'll paint the faces of these rocks several times, you see me. And I'll use my knife on some of them too, here. but I'll want to paint it several times to get some of these angles and stuff like that in there. You know, some of this. There we go. Some of that light color. Right, let's put some of that. Let's do the flat part of the rock right here. Change the color a bit. Some of this flat part of these rocks, these smaller ones out front here. Right. Maybe a nice little subtly different half tone pulling down in the front. There we go. Some different shapes there. A bit of the light right in here breaking up this rock. Right? So you can see, you start to see the shapes of the rocks. Let's come over here. So it's like I said before with rocks, you have three values. You have the light struck value, you have a receding plane, so you have a light struck plane, receding plane, and a shadow plane. And that's basically three values. And then after you establish those three values, so say it's a value 8, a value 5, a value 2 or 3. Then you come in and make the 6 and 7 in between and all that kind of stuff. And the other values in what we call the transitional tones of the rock. So here's my light right in here, coming up right here on this side, right on this rock. Let's add a little bit of a half tone or a receding tone, which is almost like a half tone, what we call our half tone, halfway between my light and shadow, right? Let's put a bit different light right in there, a little more gray, a little more blue, slightly different, right in there. There we go. Drop some of that in. Some of that color in there. That's pretty neat. Let's go back to a nice receding type of tone, a little more burnt sienna here. Maybe sometimes a touch of red, because that really gets that blue out of there real quick, because they're almost complements. And a little bit of light here. There we go. Get some of that tone, some of that right in here. Put in some cracks into the rocks. Here. And we'll work those. Let's get some prettier lights right in here on that front plane. Right there. That's neat. Get a bit more of the half tone. Right there. That's not bad. Right. That works. See, and I might want to add a few other like little smaller rock outcroppings, like right here. I think would be kind of neat. So you put on the light tone, a receding tone, and then you come over, burnt sienna, a little blue, little violet, to a little bit more blue, and put on a shadow tone here. Shadow tone onto the left, because that's the receding part of it, right? Let's just add this little bit of shadow there, a bit more here and there. Here. And so I'll refine these rocks. What I do now into the painting of them is, after I get this look in, then I come back and I add those transitional tones. And the other ones, like you've seen in so many other videos, the half tones, the what we call broken color tones of it, okay? So this one's kind of like a blue-gray. Maybe I have just a touch of the green and the burnt sienna, and I use some white with it. So I'm right about the same type of value, so I'll find the right value, a little more light, but a slightly warmer tone here, see? A little bit warmer tone as I paint that in, a little bit more light. And I won't cover up everything, I'll just add a bit of it into the light areas and break up some of that blueness of that rock with some other colors, see? And that is what, and the more time you spend doing that, the prettier your rocks get. And I can't, you know, I can't stress that enough. The prettier they get, so you work a lot. Now, you can leave a sharp value like that change, or if you put a half tone, which is halfway between there and there, you round the rock over. See how this just starts to round that top of that rock over. So you can leave that really sharp edge of light and dark or round it over. That's all up to you. I can soften that just a little bit, leave just a little bit of an edge there. And when I come up against the edge like there, I like to drag my finger, and sometimes if it's dry, you can take just a little water in your brush. But I do like to drag my finger and you know, soften that mark, that edge, because it's all about edges as well, what we call the edges of the rock. So see, I come back here, I'll pick up a little bit more light, maybe a touch of green into it, tap that around a bit here, and set some of that. I could increase that halftone shadow there, right in here, a little blue. Some of that comes right up there like that, you know, just to get that edge of that rock a bit. And that rock is really, really jaggedy, but sometimes too much of a jaggedy rock pulls away from your writer. I mean, if you're not adding, you know, let's say you're a landscape painter and you're painting this for the landscape of it, you don't have a writer, because you could take him out and have a beautiful landscape, then add more details to the rock. Does that make sense? Right? Yeah, and so it's up to you, you know, we're all different. Some of us don't like to paint the westerns, and you know, and you don't have to. You can just still use these paintings for beautiful landscapes, right? Let's add some broken color in here. Broken into small taps, make the rocks more chunky and stuff going on, right? So yeah, and I'll paint those several times back and forth with that, and give it a good go here. Here we go. Here. And some in here. And maybe just lighten that edge just a bit here. Not quite that much, maybe a little darker. So it's more of a half tone there, softening that rock. And see how that works? And you know, for the longest time, rocks eluded me, and now I just love painting them. Now that I understand broken color, which is important, the light struck plane, the shadow plane, the intermediate half-tone plane, and then you come back with transitional tones between those and just start dragging it around, drag some of this color around. Sometimes, you know, if I'm going one way, I may come back with another light the other way just to break it up a bit here. Grab a little bit difference with it. Does that make sense? Yeah, so that works. Let's, and see, I like that. Let's put a lighter strike plane on this edge of this one. maybe a little warm into a half tone here. And then pick up a little cooler blues. Some cooler grays into some of those half tones there. And, you know, tap on some smaller rocks too. You know, just little ones. You know, just little ones there. You know, just that looks wonderful, I think. Yeah, so it's coming along. I've got to paint the hooves and all that kind of stuff, but that gets into the details. So far, I think I'm capturing quite a bit of what I want to do with the painting there. And we've got to paint those clouds and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, that is going to come right along here. I'll get rid of, they're actually called holidays. Little holidays in the painting here. That's areas where the paint has not covered up and the whiteness of the primer and stuff is coming through. So I want to get rid of some of those here. And I want to create that nice light edge here. Here, we're going to create some grasses and stuff like that when we get it all done, but some of that nice light edge here. And I think his shirt, like right in there, that cast, is just a little bit too blue because it's just pulling my eye just a bit too much. So I'll go back to the blue. And see, I love to paint dirty. There's a lot of artists, a lot of them, that would just scream because they're constantly cleaning their palette and making the tone perfect. I like to paint a little dirty because the Heritage paints are very powerful in pigment. And so if I start adding a little bit of phthalo, I can overcome that other color really easy. But by having a bit of it in there, you create what we call a color harmony. And so, yeah, see, I take that blue out of there just a bit. Let's drag some halftone over that too for just a bit here. Soften that darkness there on him. I want to fix that arm up just till I see it a bit more. Let's go a bit blue and violet. So I'll fix it here. I see it. I'll fix it before I move on here, right? So there we go. Push some of that back there. Raise that arm off of that side here. And then I'll go the shadow. Now this time not quite so much blue. So maybe even a touch of the red, which really quickly gets rid of the intensity of the blue because it's more of a red-orange, and orange is the complement of the blue, and it gets rid of that intensity really quickly. So there, like that. Yeah, that might be better. And just the edge of it right here onto his shirt. There. That might be too much. Of course, pull this down. It'll take a bit of the working of it here. Until I get the feel that I want to have here. But it's coming. And shirts and stuff like that still take me just a bit of time of working it back and forth till I get the look that I really like. So, got to straighten up his back a bit. So pull some of those. You saw me just pull that long one down. Yeah, that keeps his back from arching too much. There, like that. That's good. See, I grayed down some of that blue, which is what I like. Let's take some of this gray right into this. Beautiful color. Add a little bit of the burnt sienna and stuff with it. And we'll put it on the lighter part of his hat brim back here. Right, that's a bit high, but I'll paint it back in just a second. Here. There we go. Now we'll darken down just a bit. Slightly different color. A little bit of that blue in there. Get a little bit darker. More burnt sienna and blue. A little darker. But this is what I'm going to do and work to, you know, get that shape here. Warm this up a bit. But that's what really makes pretty, you know, really nice hats, all that kind of stuff, is all these little tones that you start touching in and doing. And these little marks. That's what really starts getting it. Here. Okay. That's good. Yeah, that looks pretty good. So I think what I'm going to do here before I let it dry up really, really well and go have some lunch is I think I'm going to add some more light right up in here. More movement and light. And then I'll clean up my palette and stuff a bit. More greens, yellows, lights, beiges here. Maybe a bit of the burnt sienna. Here's some of these other colors. Here. Get some other, oh, that little tiny bit of blue that was in my brush looks really great as well. Get some of that in there. Some other colors, see? Some other colors. And I just model it around a little bit. We'll soften that shadow's edge there just a bit, right? And let's also do this, though, with some of our knife, because I love the way the knife does it. The knife really is my favorite way. And let's get some more of that yellow in there. A bit of that white and that yellow. Bit of that burnt sienna. This creates all kinds of grasses and stuff in there, right? And you know, and years ago when I used to do small figures and people and stuff like that, they always say, if you don't want to paint someone's ears, give them long hair. Well, I kind of take that today into horses and stuff. If you don't want to worry about the hooves, do longer grass. Because hooves for some reason throw me all the time. I mean, I did do them, that's not a problem, but they just throw me. And so I like this kind of look. But we're going to do some grasses and stuff here after I break this up. This is just good broken color. Breaking it up there where he's writing. Here, we'll get some of those colors here and carry some of this up into here. Right up into here. Right like that. Soften some of that just a bit. There we go. That's coming along. See how long we've been? An hour and a half. So we got that all in there in an hour and a half and stuff. So that's gonna look pretty good. I need to get more light into his shirt. I will do that. But this is all pretty wet. So I really like if I'm going to work on something like that, I really like to get it dry and come back to it and work on it on another layer. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to go have some lunch, and then come back in here, and I'll work another layer on this and stuff in here, and we'll do up there into that sky, okay? All right? All right, so through the magic of cameras, though, you'll be just a couple seconds, but it's going to be about an hour or so, okay? All right, I'll see you in just a minute. Hi everyone, welcome back. Okay, had a little bit of lunch. Now let's get back into it. Let's do some on that sky up there, that cloud. I did come back in and lighten his shirt here just a little bit, and I think I need to, I got his collar running right into his shoulder here, and I want to change that just a bit here before I get started. So while I have some of this color, maybe a little bit wet still, a little bit of the violets and some of the tan here, the burnt siennas, that nice gray color, real light gray here. And I'll put some extender in it, thin it out here. And we'll just drop his shoulder down just a bit, so you see the difference there. And it should be a little, when you're doing this, you should be sure you can see how it's a little lighter than what I have on the surface. That's what you look for, because acrylics dry darker, right? And if we all just remember that, we'll all be fine, okay? So, you know, that's the one thing I did enjoy the years that I painted with oils, is they dried the colors and stuff that you saw. But acrylics don't necessarily do that, so you know, just model through some of this other. We're going to add more to the sky here. But there. See, it's got a little bit of a drop, just a bit. And I like that better. Okay. Now, to start to work back there, I like to give something to work into. It doesn't have to be wet, but I like to slide stuff along. So I'm going to take my big brush with some extender, and I'm going to go over. Sometimes when I come back, like after lunch or a break, I like to put a little extender over most of it here. Let's put it over the horse and stuff too, because if you notice, it wakes up the colors to what you were when they were wet, and it gives you a good look at it. Now, you don't want a ton on the surface, so I'm going to wipe it down a bit, because it'll just cause stuff to become too transparent, so we don't want to do that. So let's work in some of the dark colors and then to the light color. So I'll use my 3/4 inch brush. We'll look up there and see that real dark, and I want to start pulling in some of these kind of blue grays a little bit more, violety grays here. So violet, right? And then we'll get some grayness into that, and a bit of white. And that's pretty gray. Matter of fact, I don't know if I want to go too much darker than that, because that's pretty dark. And a little different than what I had here before. And we'll just slide this along here. We'll make some clouds here in a minute, but I just want to just get some of the feeling of this coming through here, right? And we can take our big brush, especially, you know, with the big brush, you can take your big brush, pinch wipe some of that extender off. Just grab some of this light, just a little bit of the light, and have that in your brush, and you can work that back and forth in here to soften some of the movement here, and some of those colors and stuff in there. That's what I like. Now, you can, you know, a lot of clouds, you know, you put a big boily action here. So you can do some of that, you know, little curvatures and stuff to it, which we get the big storms out here in Nebraska, of course, with the tornadoes and stuff too. But the sky gets all this boiling action to it. So little curvatures to it here. And that, but I don't want to do it too much here, so I'm just going to pull back through and soften some of that, and pull some of this gray over here. It's just turning into a storm back there, right? And now we can pull up to the front of that here and lighten this up with some gray, because we're going to do just something. Now, there's a couple ways. Let me just show you. So we can do this. okay, which you can work in some light colors here to do the clouds, which works really, really nice. That works really nice. The other way I like to do it is with the knife, and you've seen me do this many, many, many times with the knife. But right now, the color is really thin, so the knife will dig a little bit. See how it goes on, but it digs a little bit here. So, but it does give a different kind of a look, a more impressionistic look that I like. So, you know, maybe a combination of the both would be nice. You know, just work this grays here. Maybe a little bit of both. But you have to use your lights a little heavier with the knife than what you do with the brush. But the other thing to remember is that, you know, you could put the darks on with the knives and as well. But whenever you use the knife, you want colors a little bit thicker. Otherwise, it digs ever so slightly. So let's just pull this down, and it'll just like that. We'll soften some of that across the sky here. Let that just, some of these edges. This is just what storms out here in Nebraska look like. They pull. You could have absolute clear blue sky and then this mountainous dark, you know, which is ominous here sometimes. Let's put in, I like that little bit of light right there. So let's drop some of that up and into the cloud. And then we'll start pulling up and down slightly like this. And that's going to give you the feeling of the rain. So I'm going to add a little bit of light right over here, right up by this hill. And maybe a bit of the dark in my brush here. And then just start, you can pull up and down or pull down like this. And boom, 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 just lightly pull down like that. And the more you pull down, the finer the rain becomes. You can blur it side to side like this, blur some of it a bit like that, and then come back in again. Now the paint is really thin, and I have extender in it. This is what's giving me this thinness to it, right? And let's work a slightly different color, a little more burnt, a little more violet here. Boom, yeah, that's a pretty color. Get some light in there, maybe a little open medium. Open medium helps it as well, right? That's kind of a pretty, little bit different gray. Put that in your brush. Pull that down here. There we go. Yeah, and some of this can be misted right along the edge of that hill. Now, I just put on too much right there. And so if you make a mistake like that, actually I wanted to show you what to do. Make a mistake like that, you just pull water through it, okay? Just grab some water, pull it through, and then you can use that water to pull right back through like this, okay? And that will take you right out of that and back into your rain again, see? Okay, so let's use a little bit of that rain right down here like that. Some of it you want to start to blur that back hill, so you can go on a little heavier, go lights and darks a little heavier. Some of it pull down a little bit towards the front of it here. Maybe a little bit darker, slightly different color here. There we go. Blur sometimes side to side just a bit. There we go. And then I'll come back. Let's get a little bit more violet. Blue violet here. Some of the browns just softly in the brush. Just softly in the brush. Restate some shadowy clouds here. There we go. Just like that. And I like that one kind of darker one there. A little more blue and violet. here. Put a little open medium. Sometimes if I want the color to stay thicker in my brush, I'll use open medium. Then I know the color's thicker in my brush, so I use a real light touch here as I add this other shadow here through this cloud and down here like that. But overall, I want to keep this just a little soft. You don't want to make a violent storm like I've done sometimes out at sea. You've seen those, right? Let's take our soft brush and pull just a bit, just to blur that just a bit. I like that with some of those hills. Now, there's, with the falling of the rain, so you got that. With the falling of the rain, you sometimes get those, like out here, we see it looks almost white as some of the, sun shines through it. Sometimes it's a hail color, it looks almost like a snow or a hail. So you can come back and hit some light colors here, like off of just off the bottom of the cloud here. Sometimes a little bit of the light comes through, light and dark comes through there like that. I like that. And right up here, I like that. See that spot of light, that is in that. I like that. And so I want to kind of give a little spot of light. Just tap it around and then just pull through here. Some beginning right up there, right? And you can pull back some dark through, but try not to pull like too much because you'll blend it too much, right? You'll blend it too much. So just some nice medium value, super light touch, and just pull down and just pull down. And it gives that cloudy rain look, which is what we want. Right there like that, right? That looks, I like the way that looks. That's pretty nice. And then let's take some of this. We'll model a little bit of open medium, a little bit of, I like open medium and the extender together. Many times I like that. Let's just move some of this through. Kind of a real light gray. Here through, tap this into this color here. Here we go. Right up by the cowboy's hat. Stay out of his hat, David. Right up into here. Some of that right in there. Beginning of that. Now, and you can use this to rebuild maybe a cloud or two up here. Right like that. And approach it really slow. You don't have to pound stuff in there. You can layer it. And if you're not sure, you can get it all done like this and then turn around and do some more, right? So, yeah, but that's kind of looking just like that right up there. I kind of captured that. Okay. But this light really does soften out. And I want to get some of this. I like the light warm. So I want to restate a little bit more light warm back there. So you see that light warm that I had there, which was from the beginning of the painting. We get a little bit of beige and yellow into that as well, right into this. Slightly different, well, slightly different color, but light. And so we add a little yellow, a little beige to that, warms it right back up. And we'll get that whitish color into it. That's pretty. And we'll model this like this. Create the atmosphere here. creates the atmosphere. If you hear the snorkeling and stuff, my girls, my labs, have joined me here in the studio. They finished their lunch, so they've joined me here in the studio, which means we might experience some snoring pretty soon. But here we go. Just like that. That's kind of neat. I like that warm right up against him here and against those hills here. Really plays nice. Okay, so we got some of that. You can see how that looks now. As it dries down, you want to add more, you can add more. If you want to reach up into the sky just a bit, or even take some of this light, you know, work that in through there, you can pull down a little bit more. It's up to you. I don't want to take too much away from the horseman, so I don't think I'm going to do too much more to that right up there. Okay. Now let's slide back over so I'm not in the way of the painting here. And let's continue on with some of this this guy. Let's get some of the, you know, I told you about the rocks. We can work on some of those rocks, but we want to get some more into the ground and stuff here. So let's just start modeling some of that in here. I want, you know, I want this really gray against some of this warm color here, and I think I'll put a little green. We'll just model some of this up. This is what I call modeling it up, and see all of this, getting all these colors. And sometimes this just takes a while to get all of these colors in here like that. Let's get a little burnt sienna, a little green, a little yellow, a little medium beige here, right? And we'll get some of this. Now we can turn some of this into grasses like I've showed you before, right? We showed the grasses. Boy, you know, that just that tiniest bit of extender that's on there is causing this to slide really nice. Let's get some gray, some of the gray from the clouds, because that pulls harmony down in there. And it'll make it look like little rocks and stuff as well, right? And got to get some of this right up by the horse. Here we go. So the horse doesn't look outlined through like that. Good. Okay, some of this. There we go. Yeah, see, that's good coloring in there. Yeah, and I think I might, this is a personal artist choice, and I'm going to do it a little more light yellow right back up in there, because it's just a beautiful contrast. And it's different. And I try, you know, in so many things that I paint and I show you guys, I try to show a bunch of different things, except for like the roses. You guys really like the roses, so I don't change them up too much. I try to give you as many looks as possible, but and you like those. But for here, I want to see if I can get that light. See, I like that back there. It's like light shining through. Let's put a bit of that light, but some of this light come through in the grasses that we put in. So, but we'll put some of it in here. Just modeled like this. This gives you your movement of your ground. Try not to push too many times because you'll blend it. We don't want to blend it. We want this modeling, this difference of stuff going on there. Okay? All right. So that sets that. Now, let's, before we go on to do some more of the rock, let's go on to a little bit more of the detail of him. Since I have this light, you know, I'll come back with my smaller little filbert or flat, and we'll put back on his little hand here. Okay, his glove that we see here, maybe a bit of shadow. He's, you know, not as far as, you know, horsemen and stuff that I painted, he's not like real huge, so we can't get a tremendous amount of detail there take a little bit of blue and a little burnt sienna. That's the shadow colors that I like to use. Let's look at that photo. And let's just tap in some shadow down this side here, a little wider right before his fingers, right there, okay? And then, you know, I like to, if I put the light on, I like to just break the edge of that light with some marks, and or break the edge of that shadow with some marks. I like to do that here. Kind of sets it into place there, just like that. Softens it out a bit. I think that I'll take some of this warmer, just a bit of this shadow color, and glaze that right on there, onto that. That's where his casting arm is there. And then we'll put some yellows with some of those beiges and stuff, and we'll get a bit of this onto his chaps. Here, there, like that. And I try to paint them as simplistic as possible. Try to, get a mark on here that kind of gives the direction of it. Maybe, some to pull across because it's bending around his leg there, right? And of course, that one that's in the reference there has all the danglies and all that stuff. I never wore those. I didn't like those. But you can add those on if you want. But I'll add a little more burnt sienna, a little brown, a little bit of blue. Here is a shadow, maybe a bit of violet in it, as a nice shadow here. And we don't see that much shadow in the reference photo, but I'll put some in here because we know it should be here. There, like that. Maybe a bit more of the yellow and the white. And, these are just all contrasts. And I do, even though you don't see it on him, I do like to pull down and then pull down slightly. It gives him a knee. And I do like to give like the look of a knee. Here, let's pull some of the yellow across. So I use some different marks to create that, just the movement interest of the fabric, like I do here with his shirt and stuff. So, a couple of different marks here to do that and set his chaps, right? Let's come over here, some blue. That's actually kind of a nice blue right in there. I used violet first, so last time, so I'll use a little bit of blue-green. Then we'll add some violet here to it, some light violet. That's a little too bright, too light. Get some more violet in there. Kill the blue with just a touch of burnt sienna. And that always grays it. Let's just tap some of that off. Here, that's better. There we go. Again, we're going to paint very simplistically him. Paint all of this very simplistically. Simplistically. Let's put a bit of that blue showing up right from his pants, right there, right before it goes into those chaps, right there, right? Maybe put the light edge of those chaps right here. These are all little details, so you could use the edge of your filbert or the chisel edge of your flat to help you draw that, right? Let's go a little blue and burnt sienna. There we go. And you don't, and this is what I like to do, is just take the colors back and forth. They don't need to be perfect. I'm just going to soften that a bit there. They don't need to be perfect here. Just take the colors back and forth to create the edges and the movement of the edges, and then the impressionism of it. Let it be impressionistic. Don't try to draw it perfectly, guys. You don't need to. So here we'll work some of that edge. That's the shadow that's there. We'll come back out to a little lighter edge here. A little bit underneath his knee there. Right, that's good. And I think I'll pull this side down just a bit more. That gives a little bit more flatness to the chap. We'll stay out of that shadow. Maybe a bit more burnt sienna. Here. That's good. A little bit of that. We'll leave that pant leg there though showing. And just some nice shadow here. The edge of some nice shadow to help shadow out that stirrup there. And again, I'm going to stay pretty simplistic in a lot of this painting here. A little light color to light burnt sienna to say the side of the stirrup there. Maybe just a touch more light here. Say the edge of that stirrup. I'm going to reset his pant leg here. A little bit more color. Just kind of tap that up a bit. A little bit of shadow. So I work back and forth, and there we go. A little bit of his pant leg. Let's pull that part of his pant down again. So you see that. There we go. And I think I'll put a light edge. So I'm using that. See, obviously, I'm not copying the other one because the chap is a lot wider, but I'm using it for inspiration in developing this one. Right, so I'll just put the edge there. And before, you know, on other paintings, I've put more details like into the chaps and the little belt that joins it on and all that kind of stuff. And you can do that if you want. I don't think this painting really needs that much detail. I want to keep it kind of impressionistic and just real painterly, I think. Different wise. You know, just a impressionistic, painterly look to it. There we go. And maybe just a bit of shadow on his boot. Here. There. Let's put a lighter blue on the edge of his pant leg there. Just so, you know, it's, what you're thinking is maybe just some differences of light and dark so that the viewer can see the different areas. Does that make sense? You don't need to, and I'll do that with light and shadow and basically light and shade and outlining, kind of almost outlining there. Like to draw down that boot here, violet, dark. Take some dark tone color and just square off that heel right there. And that'll help that. And then by coming back up to that light on that on the stirrup, drawing that around, and then underneath, you slowly define that a bit more. Does that make sense? Right? And the reference photo is very light, almost orange. It's very light burnt sienna, so I'll just add a bit more to that. But that's all that really needs. Now, I have the top rim of the saddle, which the back of the seat of the saddle, which will show up right there. Okay, and then I'll put a line of dark blue, violet, and burnt sienna here, nice dark here, right underneath that rolled edge there. So we see that. So it's almost like just, you know, painting the structure, just almost outlining the structure of it. That's what I'm doing. But the lines are not like perfect and not heavy texture. Does that make sense? And so I don't, and I'll let some of it blur off so I get that nice impressionistic edge there. There we go. Like that. Let's run a little burnt sienna so you can put that dark, and then you just run a little burnt sienna through it, and see, you get it just a touch softer, see? It's a great way. You know, let's just straighten that out just a bit. A little bit more of the yellows in here. There we go. Those chaps. A little bit of that shadow. Thin out the stirrup. There we go. And a little bit of the light on that stirrup as it rounds this corner right here. That's what will happen. Light will hit right there. But again, you know, as an artist, as a Western artist, sometimes I do more detail like this, and sometimes I don't. And so that's up to you whether or not you're going to do it. Let's restate. I love this hat area here, so I want to make sure I get this there. And a little bit up here into the and a medium shadow, so just a little bit of light into that too. It almost fades into the other one, this back shadow, and then we'll add just a touch more light right up to the front of it here. Across and down. And soften this edge there like that. That looks pretty good. I like that with him and that. Now let's go back up onto the horse, okay? And I want to use kind of a little bit like an 8 or so, 6 or an 8, you know, a horse this size. Here's an 8. Is one of my favorite brushes to paint with, so I'm going to grab that. Let's restate some of the others, slightly different than what we did before. So here I'll state some burnt sienna on him and see how that just warms and puts this glow in him, you know. And then as I'll step over here to the side to my burnt sienna and blue, maybe burnt sienna, blue, and a little red violet. Red violet is a beautiful, cooler tone with the burnt sienna in a horse like this. So it's a beautiful, cooler tone. You can see a lot of the tone in there. Let's be a little careful because that's a little dark. So push it around a bit there. And that burnt sienna is really warm. So I love the color of the horse in that painting there. He's not quite at that bright, so he has a little bit of that grayness. Now, how would you get that grayness? One of the beautiful things is, because you're always painting for harmony, right, is to reach up to your cloud and pull your cloud back down, which our clouds are right up here into those violet, that blue violets, and a little burnt sienna. Right, so this is going to become, that's the gray that we used up there in the clouds. So let's take this gray very lightly, maybe some open medium in this, and let's come right in here where we see the light on him, and let's add that gray right back up, just small marks here, right back up and into that burnt sienna, and see how you get this lovely marking here. And then we can come in more specifically like you see on the horse there, like on this back, on this side here, and do more of the structure of the horse here with those lights, right? Boom. Right there like that. That might be a little too blue. So just a touch more burnt sienna and red violet here. Just a touch. But boy, that is a pretty gray on him. And it takes him, it harmonizes with the clouds, if that makes sense, right? So add some of that. Let's add some of that right down his leg here. Just a bit up here. Right, some of this down right in there like that. And then we'll come over with some more burnt sienna and blue, which is that gray. Let's get a little bit more burnt sienna and a little bit more blue with just a bit of that gray. So, but not real bright burnt sienna. So we have some bright areas there, but let's get some darker, almost gray areas in there as well. That's a beautiful little tone to put in there also. So now you can see all the tones heading into him, right? And that's what we're trying to do. Get these tones into him. Let's get some of that tone right down here on his leg. Some of it right here. Right here. Right there on him. And a little darker right here on the back side, right back here. Paint that rump line here. Get that shadow from his back leg, the knee of his back leg there, right? Some of the shadow from that right up here. So that bit of gray into this burnt sienna and the blue is wonderful. Just softens it right on down here. Some of this back here, right in there. And I'm going to reach up into this gray again, soften this, and reset. It's just a little blue. That's better. Just a little bit blue. And maybe a bit of burnt sienna and the beige and the light. So it's a touch lighter that we can just kind of skip over that area and hit some of those little shines and lights that we see on the horse. And there. That's kind of pretty. Do you hear her snoring? This camera's picking that up. She is out here. Yep. Here we go. Yeah, that's kind of nice. Let's get the light back up on there again, though. So some of this light kind of reflecting around, pushing around there. Right there. Those grays. This light. And we warmed that just a touch when we went over to here. Right in there. Get that. And let's put that burnt sienna almost by itself. It's just a lovely little glowing color here as a nice transitional tone some places, here like that. And right up on the top leg here's a little more gray and burnt sienna right up here. That's good. That's pretty color. And then we'll get some of that softer gray. And you notice, see, I'm mixing and modeling. I don't want to just use the same gray all the time. So I tap over into some of this and some of that and just change the gray, right? That's all I'm doing. Here we go. Yes. Bit right up here on the, just a touch of a highlight right up there, right? Let's get just a touch of this on the side of his face here. There we go. Just like that. Let's look to the front leg and drop this line down a little straighter. I got it a little curved. Drop that line down a little straighter. There. And touch of a shadow here on his knee right here, because this leg is a little lower right here because it's bending back towards us. Right there. There we go. Maybe just a touch of that blue and gray. There. And I'll just add, this is starting to dry up right here, so I just add a little extender to it. I'm almost done with it, so just add a little extender to it. Let's get a darker blue, violet, burnt sienna here. Get some of that darkness right in there. Some of the cast shadows here. Some of the back form shadows, the back of the knee here. The edge of this one coming forward, right? This one mostly into the dark. Right up by their fat lock, the widens out just a bit there. And I'm just going to simplistically take some of this gray and paint almost a rounding shape here for the back of his hoof. There we go. A little bit right in there. Just the ideas of those. Yeah, I love that circling of that gray and stuff there. Maybe a bit of lighter grade burnt sienna right in here as another tone. That looks good. See, it's just pretty tones all through there. That's what I'm looking at. Matter of fact, that tone would look pretty right here as a transitional tone. This is what we would call broken color into a transitional tone between the light and that shadow that's right there. See? Now let's take a little bit of this light gray and we'll run just the tip of the tail there, which would be the highlight, and we'll take blue, violet, and burnt sienna as the darker here. We'll streak some of that through right in there as his tail, right? Now in that deep part of that shadow, there's one thing that I learned a lot of landscapers would take the burnt sienna as a dark, warm relief to too much shadow, and it really works. So I'll just add just a touch of that, see, right over there, and see how it warms that shadow on that side. I just love doing that now that I know about it. And let's just, right off this base, let's just rework some of this shadow few other little tones here and there, right through maybe some of the little lines of his muscles here, right? And that we see in the photo, just a few of them there. Yeah, that works. You can do it light or you can do it shadow. I find it really quite easier to do it shadow. You know, put the light in and then just draw the shadow in there. But you can do it any way that you want there. That works pretty well. I'm going to take just a touch of this dark at the corner of my brush and set in the edge of his just a casual edge of his eye. Some of this dark, since he's got a dark mane, a dark tail, we'll give him a little bit of a dark mane there. Yeah, like that. Now we have to put the detailing of his bridle and stuff, which little yellow, burnt sienna, whites. I'll just model this together here, and we'll drop this one back and just use the edge of my brush here. Tap it right along there, right? And let's grab a little more light, a little bit more light, tap into that. There we go. And pick up a little edge of light and make the little conch there if you want. His reins are in his other hand, so we don't have to worry about that. So that you don't want to paint him, just turn your horse. So, okay, so now let's go back and let's take some of our brighter yellows, the slicker color that we really want, and just drag some of that right over that. Mine was this bright yellow slicker, and it might be a bit bright, but you look at all the horse paintings, man, all the westerns, they paint a bright yellow slicker. Mine is neon, just glowed. Here. Yep, and we'll make it tied down a bit. Here. Slicker time. There we go. We have to put in some of the girth strap and stuff as well. Tie that down. Maybe the edge of his blanket here. And let's give him a nice light blanket. You might see the edge of his blanket, his saddle blanket right here. There. Let's just tap some light into that. And this is just really casual here. So, that's all we need, right? That's all we need. Some burnt sienna and stuff can be used as the shadow up underneath here. The ridges and stuff of it. Time for your yellow slicker. Boy, I can't tell you how many times that saved me from getting soaked. It was heavy though too. Big heavy, because it covered a lot. I have to find mine. It's probably up in the attic. Don't really need one out here in Nebraska. The majority of the time you see them coming and a long ways away. But boy, on the north coast up there, we use them all the time. Let's bring that up a bit. A little bit of highlight into it. A little more stuff going on. Just some light and shadow here. Slicker. Your yellow slicker. Yep. There we go. Yeah, that looks pretty good. Oh, and I like the horse. Now, let's take a lighter. You know, mine was a saddle, and then it had a weaved girth strap, so we see a lot of this girth strap here, so we might want to make a light one. And then it joins up with the buckle into the saddle. So let's just cross this up and lighten it up a bit. Give the feeling of that. And then some of our saddle color. Yep. That's kind of neat. It had a loop right there, and we'll just give the impression of it there. And that's all you need. Just kind of a fun painting. I really enjoyed this one. There, we'll give that just impressions of it. You can make some of the dangly down, some of the little tie downs, the leather tie downs and stuff. Little things going on. You can add those in. Let's add up a little higher here. The edge of the saddle blanket, a little higher. There. Okay. That looks pretty good. I could do a little more work on the hooves and all that stuff, but again, we're being impressionistic, so I just might make some just some statements, there of what they are, you know, there, and we'll put some grasses and stuff along there. And I love the blurred edges and the lost edges through there. That just, it makes it more painterly. Does that make sense? So it's not perfect and outlined, right? That's what I try to avoid. Let's grab some of the yellow here. Straighten out some of his knee. Here. There, like that. That looks pretty good. Overall, I love that painting of the horse there. Now, let's look to the, so we got to look to the rocks and to the grasses and stuff like that. So first, let's look to those rocks. All this is beautiful rock color. Browns, blues, right? And all this is beautiful broken color. You could use, some open medium. You can keep it thin with a little bit of extender medium. And I'll just come up here, add, so this is a nice kind of a burnt sienna reddish kind of brown. I'm going to add some of that into the mid-tone areas here. And this also, this color, see, it carries some of my horse color right out into there. See, you could see the horse color back up there. Isn't that neat? And so that brings the harmony to the painting. So you just don't have like gray rocks here. Yeah, you just don't. I just always laugh at her snoring away. So you just don't have like gray rocks. See, they're going. And you can add a few other little, ones around here and stuff, and then a little more shadow here. So like in here, your shadows, let's go a little bit softer than that. A little bit softer shadows. And so this is a deeper shadow, so it would look to the deepest parts of your shadows. Right? Maybe some of the grays of the horse that you see here. Right? That would be pretty. Right in there. See, that looks good. Now that's a lot of contrast, light and dark contrast, but like look at that one that's there. There's a lot of contrast, light and dark contrast. So, that's up to you how you're going to do it. Let's put another little broken rock line right in there. There we go. And step up, add a little more blue, which makes it a bit more gray. Let's go slightly lighter into the gray. Mid-tone, transitional tone here. Grab some of that. It can go, transitional tone here can go right on the mid-tone, the mid-ground area, and the light area. So it's a nice transition. And use it to lighten up some areas of your rock. Here. Yeah, and I'll go back and forth, like if I take off too much or if I want to add another like little crack into the rock, I'll do that. We can go a little lighter here. And just kind of brush over some areas. Here, get rid of hair like that. Isn't that fun? And so this is a little number. So I started out with quite a large brush, and now as I start to apply some of these other tones, I'll go down here like this to like a number 4, smaller one, and be a little bit careful with that. Just grab some of this. I want to make sure I started pulling too much sideways, so I'll pull some straight up and down here and get that height to the rock here. But you vary some of those pulls there. That's what you do, right? There we go. That's looking pretty good. And, grab some darks and then some lights and play these back and forth. And, I've showed you many times where I'll use the knife, because the knife is, it's like made for rocks, especially if you want to get some of that last interest into the rocks. It's fantastic. So here I'll make a light skipping color I can put on the light plane here, and I'll just skip over the edge of it like that. See, so I'll bring up this edge and just drag it a little thick. The color's a little bit thick, and that hits that light on it. Really nice. Grab some medium color here. Let's go a little bit bluer gray here. And I'll use this a lot for broken color. See, I can just slide that right into that rock and break up some of that broken color, see? The knife is magical for doing this stuff, I'm telling you. Looks great, but keep it within its values of where you're working there, right? let's round this corner up a bit. There, get some of that light on this rock. Some of this shadow there. So, and you can really give you those cut edges that are just so nice. Grab it, pull down a bit, create that other little edge. And you can blur it. I'll blur it with my fingers to soften some of that rock sometimes. That's a bit bright. I was going to put a little bit of a glow color. You've seen me do that on other paintings, but that was a little bright. So blue, burnt sienna, that's a good base gray here. And if it's too blue, you just add a little more burnt sienna. That's a good base light gray. And then variations of it, greens, reds, yellows. You know, don't want to make a rainbow, but you could use all different kinds of variations of those here to, you know, paint some real pretty rocks. Here, put some right in there. There we go. Just little bits. Let's take some of this lighter blue up here. That's nice. Maybe a little bit lighter. And just lightly touch over the knife and let it just kind of skip over the surface a bit. Which is one reason why I do like to use boards, because the knife skips over it evenly, where if you're on a canvas it doesn't always do that. So I like how this knife skips over the surface on the boards as opposed to a canvas. But it can be done on both. There. Here, let's put this light right in there. And not as much. I'm not going to add, like I said earlier, before lunch, I said I'm not going to add as much detail to some of these rocks like I would if it was a pure landscape, because they'll take away from my horsemen. So, you know, and that's my call. That's my judgment call. But if you're not going to paint the horsemen, then and you're painting this more as a landscape, then you might want to add even more and even some additional rocks in there. But add some more interest and stuff like that to it. That's up to you. And go ahead and let it be a little light, because you know it's gonna dry down, right? It's going to. That's just what the acrylics do. There we go. That's kind of neat looking rocks there. Now we'll go in. Let's reset and set some shadow. So some blue, some violet, some burnt sienna, and some extender. Let's reset some of our shadow here. And I love to, you know, you've seen me in the last couple of videos use the paper towel a lot when I go creating grasses and stuff like that. I love to do that. Let's set some shadow right out in here. Right, some just little bits of that right there. Let's set some of this shadow off of this one. Right, we like that. A little lower, a little light. That just sets it all. Let's set the shadow from our horse. The cast shadow from our horse. There. There we go. Just like that. That's good. Now, let's take some yellows, some whites, some beige, medium beige, right? And start making a few up and down. Blur some of those edges there just a bit. You could add more rocks in there if you want as well. But change the color a bit. And I'm just using the corner of the brush. Now you've seen me do grasses all different kinds of ways. So this is just one. Sometimes sometimes I do this. I'll pull a color like this and then I'll just blur it like that with the paper towel. I like that as well. I like all kinds of ways. Yeah. There. Here we go. Just some nice indications of them. I don't have to, I'm not going to get wild with it. Just some indications of some of the grasses and stuff. Here, so a few like right up over the edge of the rocks here. Right up there. Right up into our shadow here a bit. And then we'll darken down some of our yellows and stuff. And we can add some of that in here, some of that movement in here, grass movement into these shadows. Right there, see? So you get the feeling of the movement. There, like that. Yeah, that looks pretty good. I want to take a soft grayish white and just indicate. Some of his hooves there. That's good. But leave some of that just kind of blurry there. That works. Yeah. I could define up some of that. I don't think I will. I will take burnt sienna and yellow here and draw a little more line here for the chaps. There. And I want to redefine that cast shadow a little better here. There we go. And I should have right on the edge, I like that in the photo where you have a real crisp, clear light and dark around this cast shadow here. So I'll add that in there. Yeah, really fun. This has been a very enjoyable one. I painted it, let's see, before lunch we did about an hour and a half, and so we did here, so 2.5 hours into the painting right now. That's not too bad for an, it's a quick little painting. It's not a super difficult painting. It's quick. And, you know, like right in here, now I could clean up some of that, and I'm not real sure whether or not I should. I like the lost edges of it. You know, like his legs and stuff here. But I should maybe a little bit, clean it up. Yeah, it could be. I'm looking at that with that. His knee could go a little bit higher here. And let's just put a touch of out. So I'm looking now into details and just kind of fixing the drawing a bit, and you know, just a few little things. But I love the blurriness of that. That just looks really good. Now I have let's go blue and white, and then into our burnt sienna, so it's gray. Maybe a bit of violet here, and we have the water, which we are going to push through. Gets a little wider right up here, and we might just, I mean, so what's his reason? Is he just writing? You know, is he, or is he watching cattle? So should we put some cattle or something out there, you know, just indications of them or something, right? So let's grab just a touch of the dark here, just little bits of it there, right? And little bits of the light. Let's go with a little bit lighter violet kind of color. Almost like his shirt. Here. Set that up. So it's... Set some of this up light. Here we go. Just like that nice little, just windy little river right down there. And so it would get light. It would actually show up lighter back here where the lighter sky is. So I should probably, it'll be almost light because, you know, as your angle changes, your viewing angle changes here. As it gets lower or back up there, or actually rises to the horizon line, the reflection becomes lighter. It gets darker down here. So the reflection actually becomes lighter. So we'll do that here. There, like that. There. And you know, so I could put like little dots of cattle or something like that in there. I don't think I will, but you could, you know, I mean, yeah, that's something you could do, right? And a little line there for that hoof. And then you can always, and if you have problems or something with the hooves, just cover them with grass. That's what I always say. Yeah, put it in deeper grass. I'm just going to put in a few more little ones here. And I like that. I like the simplistic rocks. There is just a couple of little areas, like up and around his hat, where I hit it at that last, that I want to go real light here and just take out. Grab some extender, and I hit that right up in there. That's a little too yellow. But all you really have to do is just thin it out and then exit, turn it like this. And that will give you your atmosphere. Just like that. Yep. Little bits of that up in there. There we go. So, yeah, I kind of like that. I don't think, I love those colors like right there in the rocks. I love those colors in the rocks. I don't think I'll do anything more to them, really. You know, I might add just a little medium light right up like on the edge right here. Break that edge a bit more. But that's just little things, and I like kind of that yellow slicker just standing out there. But that's all little things. You know, we've got the big stuff done. Right? So she is just going to town. So yeah, just, and I love the combination of the brush and the knife when I do those rocks, but keep your values, you know, your three main planes. That's the main part, is the three main planes. And then from there, you add little halftones in between, and you can break up and, you know, grab these rocks, do different things with them and stuff. Just a whole heck of a lot of fun, okay? So, what, an hour, 2 hours, 46 minutes, somewhere around there? Somewhere, no, let's see, an hour and a half and an hour and 16 minutes. So that's 2 hours and 46 minutes. So that's not too bad for doing that. I might bring up those back mountains back there just a little bit. You know, sometimes, you know, you sit there and you go, ooh, you know, what should I do? And you start looking for stuff, kind of like what I'm doing now, and you really shouldn't. But I do think I need those back mountains brought back up a bit. But because, you know, what I've noticed over the years, it's been an enjoyable painting. I've really enjoyed this painting. And it went really quite quickly. And so you don't want it to be over. And so you start looking and playing, and that can get you into some trouble if you're not careful. Right? But these could go up just a bit for some interest back there. And yeah, just a bit. There, just a little more into the mountains here. All of that is a personal artistic choice. It's up to you how much you're going to do. But I like that, okay? And I like that. Now it's going to be, do I want to... I really liked that light that I had shining through there, and I've kind of lost it a bit. So I think I'm going to bring that one light right back. Medium beige, a little yellow, a little light. Let's add just a touch of burnt sienna so it's a little different than before. And bring that light right back in there from the horse. See that little spark right there? I like that. And maybe some of this lighter gray here, up this rump just a little bit higher. This is, to me, the interest area right here, and it leads you further out into the painting. So we do want to get some interest into this. And a nice, beautiful, warm, kind of orangey light color right in here, a bit of it. That's too much. Orangey light. Get some of those tones in there from your horse. That's pretty. Maybe just a touch of that burnt sienna here. I love painting the tones. And, you know, the thing is that I'm a tone painter, so I love to mix. I love to mix those tones and look for the differences in it. But look at each little addition that I do here, look at what it's adding to the horse. That's the big part, right? And this is what I tell you guys, this is the difference between a $500 painting and a $5,000 or $50,000 painting, is the work coming back and doing a little more tonal work into the painting. That's what sets some of the masters apart, see? So once you get it done and come back and do a little more, right? Boom, it's like that. That works pretty nice. Let's put just a touch of that light right in there. There we go. And then we'll just call, I like that. So I'm going to call that fun painting. Very different, very fun, very painterly. Hope you enjoyed it. It's a quick little, nice little study. You could put, you know, more rocks back in through there, a little bit more stuff going on. That's all up to you, but I kind of like that whole thing. Now the last thing that you have to decide is, are you going to follow some of the Western things that I've shown you with the addition of the blue or blue-violet to some of the shadowy areas of the horse? And I'm going to do it right now, and before I finish it up, take my blue-violet here, just a little bits of it, and add those in. Those little, I love these little touches here, especially like into the shadows, like right in here would be pretty. Little bits of it, right? Little bits here. Sometimes into the rocks, you know, little bits of that into the rocks are nice little touches here. There we go. Let's just put that edge of his pants up there again. Like that, don't breathe. There we go, little touches. And your eye just picks up that little bit of blue going through in a few areas there. All right, I think that's done. Thanks very much for joining me on this. I've also had a discussion on the channel there about some of the ads. You know, you click over and you let YouTube set the ads, and you get a tremendous amount of ads showing up. And I didn't realize that many were showing up. I was just letting YouTube do it. So we're trying to figure out what's I like, you know, I mean, ads. We need to have ads. YouTube wants to have ads. You can't make, you know, there has to be some because you have to make money. And the ads help support this channel too, even though we make just a little bit off of the ads. But I like them about every 30 minutes. I don't like to break up the lesson that I'm talking with you guys about. So, but we're trying to find a nice, even thing, because one viewer wrote me and said it's just annoying, and I agree, and I don't like them either. And so we're trying to find a nice balance. So, you know, just bear with us on the channel. And as you do that, you know, as we try to figure it out a little bit, okay? I'm just going to lighten this up just a little bit more, maybe another little cut edge there. Yeah. But anyway, bear with us as we try to do that, because we're trying to figure it out. We want to have the best channel here, so, you know, for all of us. So, you know, bear with us, okay? So don't forget to hit subscribe, okay? If you're new to the channel, hit subscribe there. Click the little bell so that you can get notified when we have new videos. And, you know, don't forget to drop a comment in. We really appreciate it. You'd like and you comment, that helps the videos. Then we don't have to have as many ads, okay? All right. Thanks, guys. I really appreciate you for following me on this painting journey. And I'll see you on the next one. I have some trays. We're going to paint some floral trays, too, okay? And I promised, and Maria, I know, I promised you like a portrait and an animal portrait. We're going to go back to that again, okay? All right. I'll see you guys.